perception. I just finished lunch. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 5, Sensation and Perception. I'll try to make it painless. Good luck. What does it mean to sense something? Sensory receptors are specialized neurons that respond to specific types of stimuli. When sensory information is detected by a sensory receptor, sensation has occurred. For example, light that enters the eye causes chemical changes in cells that line the back of the eye. These cells relay messages in the form of action potentials to the central nervous system. The conversion from sensory stimulus energy to action potential is known as transduction. And of course, this is going on constantly. We have sensory receptors all over, not just our eyesight, but also our smell, our taste, hearing. These are all sensory perceptors. Sense of touch is a constant. Um, Sense of taste is a constant. So these are going on all the time. Now, the reality is that we don't pay attention to all of them at the same time, usually. Last night we went out to a restaurant in Davenport. Was it in Davenport? Yeah, it's in Davenport. And while I was there, it was really kind of an interesting place because they had barbecue there, and so the smell was very intense. And then they brought our food, and of course, the whole time we're seeing, we're smelling, we're tasting what we were eating. Food was very, very good, uh, and we were at the same time they were. It was a sports bar, so we were hearing and watching what was going on the television. It was the end of basketball. So there are basketball games on all the televisions. It's really kind of fascinating. But it was just a rich environment of sense of your senses. You could hear, smell, taste, feel, all of the things that were going on in the restaurant at the same time. I was there with my daughter, my wife, my daughter, and my grandson. He had just played in a soccer game and we were talking about the game and how he had responded to one of the better players in the state and had actually shut him down because well he did score one goal, but he scored a goal when Reese wasn't playing. Um, so he he was able to keep him from moving forward. He was a very good ball handler, this other individual, and he wanted to move down the field, and Reese was staying in front of him and forcing him to move from side to side instead of up and down the field. So it's really kind of interesting. Anyway, that's transduction. The weakest stimulus that can be detected by a sense is the sense's absolute threshold. Scientists can measure this level by starting the subject at easily detectable levels and then reducing them until the subject can't detect the stimulus anymore. The closed chamber hearing test is done in this way. Of course, when I joined the military, I had to have a hearing test, and throughout my military career, they gave me a hearing test. My wife thinks that I don't listen. She thinks that possibly I need I need hearing aids. So about 2 years ago, we went to have our ears checked. I'm pretty old. I'm 76. So I mean, it could be time for me to get hearing aids. But the reality was that I was okay and that my hearing was fine. I do have tinnitus, but that's because of what I did when I was in the military. Okay. It is possible for us to get messages that are presented below the threshold for conscious awareness. These are called subliminal messages. Despite the fact that you can detect them, or you really don't detect them. What happens is you get the message, but it doesn't. It's not intense enough for your conscious to pick it up, and these are known as subliminal messages. A stimulus reaches a physiological threshold when it is strong enough to excite sensory receptors and serve nerve impulses to the brain. This is an absolute threshold. A message below that threshold is said to be subliminal. We receive it, but we are not consciously aware of it. Over the years, there has been a great deal of speculation about the use of subliminal messages in advertising, rock music, and self-help audio programs. Research evidence shows that in laboratory settings, people can process and respond to information outside of awareness. And we know that they do exist. The military has used it uh, with personnel as well. This is a huge argument. I had one of my colleagues was a cognitive psychologist, and she claimed that subliminal messages did not exist, or that they do exist, but you're not aware of them. You can't really give somebody a lot of information through subliminal messaging, and of course, uh, I'm from an earlier era, and subliminal messages were something that we talked about all the time. And according to her research, or the research in cognitive psychology, they don't exist. So the question is, if somebody asks you, do subliminal messages work? You can either say yes or no. It doesn't really make any difference. We have proven in the past that it does work. Um, Modern psychology is skeptical as to whether subliminal messages actually do work. Each of us has different levels of absolute threshold. Many times it relies more on how much of the senses have been used or how little they have been abused as to how acute they are. But even the individual will have different levels of perception at different times and under different circumstances. And I show you this picture mainly because my students have harassed me in the past to ask me what my first wife looked like, and actually she looks a lot like this. She's still alive. Of course, she's what, 74 years old, so she doesn't look like that anymore. But when I married her, she looked like that. Her in the face. The rest of her, well, she does have hair that's about that color. So anyway, that's the reason I put this picture in here, because my students have harassed me, asking me what my first wife looked like. Personally, I've found her quite attractive. Obviously, I married her, and we had 2 children. The mixture of mechanical stimulus and emotional perception is known as psychophysical. The minimal difference between two stimuli that can be perceived as different is known as the difference threshold. Through the research of Ernst Weber, difference thresholds for the various senses have been determined. These levels are known as Weber's constants, and that's Weber right there. Weber's constant, a candle from 30 miles on a clear, dark night. Ticking of a watch from 20 feet in a quiet room, and of course, watches don't click anymore. They don't tick anymore, but they used to. 1 teaspoon of sugar dissolved in 2 gallons of water. 1 drop of perfume in a small house. You would think, what kind of perfume are we talking about here? Fly wing falling on a cheek from 0.4 inches. And if you've ever had a mosquito land on your cheek, then you know what they're talking about. These are Weber's constants. The process by which organisms become more sensitive to stimuli that are low in magnitude and less sensitive to stimuli that are a constant magnitude is called sensory adaptation. So when you go to a concert, when you first get there, the music is so loud it's almost painful. Uh, but eventually, of course, your ears adjust. They adapt to the sensation, and it doesn't seem so loud anymore. It's not like you have to leave the room because the music is too loud. Your ears will adapt. Same thing with whispering. When somebody first starts to whisper to you, potentially you can't really make out what they're saying, but after they whisper a little bit more, then your ears adapt and you can pick up what they're saying. Becoming more sensitive to stimuli of low magnitude is called sensitization or positive adaptation. Eyes adjusting to the dark, a driver adjusting to the pressure required for brakes of a new car, ears adjusting to the pitch and high pitched speaking an individual tasting milk and skim milk after drinking homogenized milk all their life. All of these things are positive adaptations. On the other hand, we grow less sensitive to constant stimulation. This is called desensitization or negative adaptation, being unable to smell bad odors after being around them for a while. I was just reading in a book. They were they were at a garbage dump, and the one lady found it so noxious she couldn't stand it. She had to go sit in the car. But the guy that she was with, it's a crime story. The policeman was able to not be bothered by it after a couple of minutes. The odor, not being able to hear constant cacophony of crickets at night or night creatures in the summer, being able to tolerate a cast or bandage after it has been on for a while, losing the cloying sweet taste of a sweet drink after the first swallow, being able to see normally after a few seconds after stepping into the bright sunlight and seeing orange. While Weber's constants assume that we all perceive things the same, the signal detection theory takes everything else into account to rationalize why we don't perceive things the same. Some factors that influence our perceptions include noise, interfering sounds, and the age and well-being of the individual motivation, expectations, and learning. And this is known as inattentional blindness. So this is a trick. You're supposed to count how many times they throw the ball. And because you're counting the number of times people are throwing the ball, you don't see the gorilla walking through. And there's the gorilla right there. He's gone now. Most people consider their eyesight the most important sense. They believe that they see even though it may be countermanded by another sense. And this is known as visual capture. So eyesight is probably the most important of your senses. Light is a wavelength of electromagnetic energy. Only a small portion of it stimulates the brain's eye, the human eye. This is referred to as the visible light and includes the colors of the rainbow. The length of its wavelength determines what color we see. And this is what we see between 400 nanometers and 700 nanometers. That is the light that we can see. We can't see infrared. We can't see ultraviolet. We certainly can't see X-rays, gamma rays, or cosmic rays. We also can't see microwaves, short radio waves, or long radio waves. All we can see is the visible light. And this is the human visibility. Now, other animals can see infrared. Some animals can see ultraviolet rays. Bees, for example, will follow the trail that is left by by a hunting bee to so that they can go find pollen. They're able to follow. I think it's ultraviolet rays, but it's they can see where the other bee has gone, and they can follow it back. The same thing with birds. They can. That's one of the reasons why they can go from South America to North America, and when they migrate, is because they have vision that we don't have. They can see things that we can't see because the human spectrum is just between 400 and 700 nanometers, and theirs is much wider. The eye is our instrument to detect light. Light is allowed in through a transparent covering of the eye, the front of the eye, known as the cornea. The white portion of the eye is a tough protective tissue known as the sclera. The colored part of the eye is a muscle that regulates the size of the opening into the eye, and this is known as the iris. And irises come in different colors. The darker the iris, the more sensitive your eyesight is in the dark. So the lighter colored eye, your eye, the more difficulty you will have at seeing in the dark. As weird as that is. The opening in the eye is known as the pupil. After the light passes through the pupil, it strikes a transparent mass called the lens. The lens is attached to muscles which make it thicker for seeing close and thinner for seeing far away. This is the lens. This is the lens right here. The lens job is to focus the light on the neuron bank at the back of the eye. And if the lens doesn't do that properly, then you have a problem seeing things. The bank of photoreceptors at the back of the eye is called the retina. The retina is composed of two types of photoreceptors, 100 million rods that see black and white, and 5 million cones that detect color. The retina also includes 4 transmitter cells that speed the sensations of the photoreceptors to the brain. Bipolar cells receive the stimuli from the rods and cones, which funnel the information through the amacrine and horizontal cells in the ganglion cells, into the ganglion cells. The ganglion cells form the optic nerve, which transmits sight impulses into the brain. The horizontal and amacrine cells are inhibitory circuit neurons that prevent misdetection due to spontaneous multiple stimulation. So it holds information. That's what they do. The fovea is an area about in the middle of the visual field that is almost exclusively cones. And this is a fovea right here. As the retina spreads from the fovea, it is made up of more and more rods until on the periphery near the lens, it is exclusively rods. So in the middle, you see color. In the middle of your vision, you see color. And on the periphery, you see black and white. Now, this is really kind of interesting. I was down in my basement the other day, and I turned my treadmill on, or I was actually turning my treadmill off. And I turned off all the other lights, and I was going to turn my treadmill off, and I noticed that the treadmill light was white, and I couldn't. I was thinking, it's not white. Why in the world am I seeing? I was seeing it out of the corner of my eye, and I was thinking, it's not white. It's red. And so when I looked directly at it, it was red. But when I saw it out of the corner of my eye, it you know, the corner of your eye only sees things in black and white. So it looked white because it was on. Anyway, I found it, and turned it off. Where the optic nerve feeds out of the eye, it is a tiny area that has no photoreceptors, and this is known as the blind spot. And this is really, you're looking at, when you look at this is what you see. But the reality is you've got a blind spot right in the middle of your vision. And the reason you don't see that, you don't see this picture instead of this picture, the reason you see this picture instead of this picture is because your brain fills in all of the missing parts. So this is what you're actually seeing. You're probably seeing it a little bit clearer than that. This is what you're actually seeing, but this is what your brain tells you that you're seeing. Because you have no rods in the center of your vision, you can see weak white light at night if you don't look directly at it. And that's what was going on. Well, you can see any light, and it looks black and white. Thus, you are more likely to detect weak light from your peripheral vision than with your direct vision. So if you're looking for something, if you're looking for, and this is one of the reasons why you're walking down the road and all of a sudden you see a light to your right or to your left. You're looking straight down the road and you see the light, and then you turn your head to look directly at it, and it's gone. It disappears. The lights disappear. And that's the reason why. Research has shown that different receptors are geared to respond to different wavelengths and thus colors. There are three types of cones that respond to our visual spectrum. Short wavelength cones to the darker colors on the ultraviolet end of the spectrum, they inhibit yellow. Middle wavelength cones cover the middle of the spectrum, primarily green, they inhibit red. Long wavelength cones respond to the colors on the ultraviolet portion of the spectrum, red and yellow, and they inhibit green. Rods, of course, detect light and inhibit absence of light. With 210 million impulses coming in, the brain must create a picture. This it does an infinite number of times a second. Even the most rapidly changing picture is detectable by the human brain. Eyes slowly adapt to darkness, the cones in about 10 minutes and the rods in about 45 minutes. This is known as dark adaptation. The eyes adapt to bright light much more rapidly. So the reality is, if you go out at night and it's dark and you sit there for 45 minutes, you can see fairly well. I see really well in the dark, strangely enough. Most people never are in the dark. They have light around them all the time. I live on a farm in Iowa. A lot of the farmers around here have what they call security lights. So if you look around the horizon, you can see where they have lights on all the time. As weird as that is. Now, I'm on a farm as well, but we don't have a security light. The reason we don't have a security light is because I feel safer in the dark than I do with a security light. Why do I feel safer? Because I see very, very well in the dark. If somebody came to hurt me, I'm guessing if they drove here, then they would be more blinded than I would be. I see very well in the dark. I have a brother that has tunnel vision. His eyes are deeper into his head. Mine, I have really good peripheral vision, but he doesn't have hardly any peripheral vision at all. He has tunnel vision. It was almost a draft deferment, but he was in the military and he was in Vietnam. And one of the jobs that he had was as a tunnel rat because we're not very large people. Vietnamese are not very large people either. So when they dug tunnels, they made them fairly small, not big enough for a football team to crawl through because their shoulders would be too broad. Well, my brother was relatively small. He only weighed somewhere between 110 and 125 pounds. And he was actually able to get into those places. And because he had tunnel vision, his eyesight in the dark was very, very good. And he also used to go out and ambush people, but we won't go into that because he saw so well in the dark. A lot of people don't see very well in the dark, and some people never spend any time in the dark. They have night lights on, they have this light on, they have that light on, but not my brother. Day vision, you're using your fovea. Night vision is a little bit different. You can see light better if you don't look directly at it at night. Actually, I don't know if I should talk about this. Actually, what you're looking for at night is movement. You can see things moving because you can see some things are darker than others, and you can see that darkness moving. It's kind of hard to explain. Through surveys, psychologists have determined that most people attribute psychological dimensions to colors. Blue and green are considered cool colors. Yellow and red are considered warm colors. There are some people who get crossover sensations from stimulation called senescence, I'm sorry, called senescence. They can hear colors and see colors in music. They also detect smells in colors, which is weird. And if you talk to these people, they'll say, well, brown smells like dirt. You know, red smells like paint or something. They get they get really strange sensations from other stimulation. The three primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. Whenever these three colors are pure, they have optimum saturation or pureness of color or brightness. So the purer they are, the brighter they are. A color's saturation can be lessened by adding it to another color, such as yellow plus blue equals green. And there's green right there. Green is not as bright as either yellow or blue. And that's one of the reasons why stoplights are red. And go lights are green. It's a lot easier to see the red than it is to see the green. When you put the primary colors together, you get binary or secondary colors. Blue plus red equals violet. Red plus yellow equals orange. And blue plus yellow equals green. Tertiary colors are created when you mix a primary color with a adjoining secondary color. And here we go. There's blue, there's yellow, and there's red. And you can see all the mixtures that you can get between red and blue. That's purple. That's lavender. All these have interesting names. This is chartreuse, as odd as that is. One of the reasons that colors are usually arranged in a circle is so that you can put complementary colors across from each other. When mixing paints, complementary colors will always yield gray or dark gray. Thus, yellow's complementary color is violet. Red's complementary color is green. If you mix the two of them together, it comes out gray. Blue's complementary color is orange. And of course, if you mix that together, you get gray as well. Each primary color has a secondary color as its complement. When you look at a specific color for an extended period of time, long enough to cause sensory fatigue, about 30 seconds, and then you look away at a white background, you will see the same image but in its complementary color. This is known as afterimage. So this picture's afterimage. If you stared at that for about 30 seconds, this is what you'd see if you looked at a white surface. This is the after image of this. So if you look at the black dot, and you look at that black dot for 30 seconds, and then you look at a white piece of paper, what you see is the American flag. As weird as that is. On the average, people can discriminate up to 150 different colors. Cross-culturally, the 6 major color groups are white, black, yellow, green, red, and yellow. And there they are right here. Individuals who see all the visible colors of the color spectrum are called trichromats. Why are they called trichromats? Because as we learned back here, where was it? Somewhere. I missed it. Okay. As we learned, there we are. We have 3 different three cones, 3 different types of cones. That's why they are trichromats. Well, anyway, which way am I going? Trichromats. Individuals who are totally colorblind can only detect light and dark and see everything in shades of gray. They are called monochromats. This is quite rare, but I have run into people who were actually colorblind. I I had a student one time that was was a monochromat, and he was in the Air Force. I was teaching on an Air Force base, and he could only see light and dark primarily. Now, unfortunately for him, it was really kind of interesting. He was an electrician too, and of course he had to tell the difference between one wire and another wire, and it always confused me as to how he could do it. Um, but a problem that he had at the time we'd gone to Desert Storm, and we'd gone into the desert, and some of the people came back with desert fatigues. Desert fatigues were camouflage uniforms that were in brown. Now, normally the uniform is in shades of green, camouflage green. And he had a problem because he couldn't tell the difference between his brown fatigues and his green fatigues. You would think the green fatigues would be darker and the brown fatigues would be lighter colored because the desert's lighter than the. Anyway, he had a problem. He also mixed up his socks, and that was a problem as well. So his wife had to set out his uniforms. As weird as that is. I haven't met a whole lot of monochromats. I've met people that were colorblind in red, couldn't see red and green. People that couldn't tell the difference between purple and blue. But he's the only monochromat I've ever met. Partial color blindness, or being colorblind to one of the pairs of colors, is fairly common. This situation is sex-linked and affects mostly males. You very rarely see a female who is colorblind, but you see a lot of males that are colorblind. This is one of the reasons why men have so much trouble with their clothes. They really can't tell the difference. I mean, if it's close, they think it's the same, or maybe they just don't care. I don't know. It's sex linked. What does sex linked mean? Sex linked means that it's you have the X and Y chromosome. Well, the X chromosome about uh, is about 2/3 larger than the Y chromosome. So if you have a problem on the X chromosome, like color blindness, the Y chromosome won't cancel it out. Because if you have two X chromosomes, that makes the individual a female, then the probability is if there is a site problem on the mother's ova, then the father's sperm will probably cancel it out. So whereas the male in the family might have color blindness, if a female from the same mother and father will probably not have the same problem. And that's one of the reasons why color blindness is mostly male. And that's another reason why female baldness is very rare. Okay, so if you can see numbers on this one, or this one, or this one, then you are not colorblind. This one is not a number. If you see 26 on this one, you see 12 on this one, and you see that 3 on that one, then you are not colorblind. Now this is really kind of interesting. If you see 70 on this one, then you are colorblind. If you see 29, then you're not colorblind. If you see 45 on this one, you're not colorblind. And if you see 26 on this one, then you're not colorblind. If you see 70, it's because you're purple, blue colorblind on this one. If you see 29, then you're not colorblind at all. There's no number in C. Okay. If you see 12 here, then you're not colorblind. If you see 5 here, you're not colorblind. If you see 8 here, you're not colorblind. If you see a number in this one, then it's your imagination because there's no number in that one. The human mind is constantly seeking understanding and conformity. When it can't find conformity and totality, it fills in the parts as best it can. When we do this, especially with visual stimuli, it is called closure. The need to make a whole out of pieces follows laws established by Max Wertheimer, called the laws of perceptual organization. So if you see an oval here, that's closure. If you see a dog in this picture, then that's closure. The reality is just a bunch of dots. But if you can see a dog, that's because your brain is telling you that you need to put things together, and these dots look like a dog. If you see an airplane here, it's because of closure. If you see a rabbit here that's smiling, that's closure. This is a famous one. This is Ajax, the Dutch soccer team in Amsterdam. If you see a Greek soldier here, then that is closure. The law of figure ground perception states that we recognize objects easier when they are in a readily recognized and usual background. When a figure is in an unnatural background, the relationship is said to be ambiguous and the perceptions tend to be unstable. Like this one, is this a man playing a saxophone or is it a woman's face? And this one, is it a vase or is it two men talking to each other? Here we have another one. Is it a duck or is it a rabbit's head? Here's the eye. Is that a duck bill or are those rabbit's ears? And this is a famous one of Batman. Or Hawkman or something. I think this is Hawkman. The yellow is, and this one is Hawkman, and the other one is Batman. The black one is Batman. Same way with this one. Other laws of perception include proximity or nearness, which is the perceptual tendency to group together objects that are near to one another. We assume that all these things have to do with the same, with one another. That's proximity. Is this? Do we count the circles? Are they groups of 7? Proximity. Similarity is a tendency to group objects that are similar together. The idea is that all of these individuals are African American, therefore they are together. But the reality is, these 4 people are together, and these 3 people together, and they don't have anything to do with one another. Okay. The same thing with similarity. Are we looking at the gray circles? Are we looking at the yellow circles? This is similarity. Do the gray circles have anything to do with each other? Similarity. Continuity is the tendency to perceive groups of similar items as continuous and in a unit, as if an X is this one thing follow the other, and the reality is it's not. If you see 4 Pac-Men, or do you see a square? Common fate is a tendency to perceive elements that move together as belonging together. The reality is these are the same kinds of dogs, all of these individuals. This is at the dog show, and they took their similar looking dogs out to walk, and they just kind of ran into each other. Now, they all had on similar clothes because that's what they had to show the dogs in, but the reality is they didn't have anything to do with one another. And the same way with these balls. Because of our need to put things together and the different circumstances that these may occur in, we have 2 strategies as to how to put things together. If we are required to create an unknown entity from pieces, as an architect, an author, or a painter, it is known as bottom-up processing. If we know the end result, then it is easier for us to work using the top-to-bottom processing. So if we are given the final product, then we can think of something as the final product, and then we can deconstruct it, and that's top to bottom. We need a building. Okay, so one of the things we need to do is create scaffolding, and then we put up the walls, and eventually, of course, we get to the point that, oh, wait a minute, we need a foundation. That's top to bottom processing. But if we are required to create an unknown entity from pieces, then we use bottom-up processing. Where do we start? If we start with the foundation first, then that's bottom-up processing. If we start with the finished building and then get down to the foundation, that's top-to-bottom processing. I'm looking at a red-headed woodpecker. I've got a red-headed woodpecker in my willow tree outside. Depth perception is accomplished through the use of both monocular and binocular vision. Mono means one, ocular means one eye. Binocular vision is what we are looking at if we're using both of our eyes. Okay. Artists are wizards at using monocular cues to create the illusion of depth on a 2-dimensional surface. Such techniques are perspective, clearness, interposition, shadows, and texture gradient, giving the observer cues as to depth. Perspective refers to the way that like objects look smaller farther away. It is also refers to the fact that parallel lines will converge as they recede in the distance, like this. These two cats are actually the same size, but the black one is closer to you, so the white cat looks smaller, or the black cat looks bigger. And there we go. The story is told of the pygmy chief who had lived all of his life in the closed confines of the rainforests of Zaire. I think it's called Zaire now. Maybe it's called the Congo. I keep changing its name. On his first visit to the plains of the Serengeti, he saw a dangerous rhinoceros off in the distance. He referred to the animal as a horned rabbit and offered to take his small bow and arrow and procure it for dinner. Never having experienced anything from more than 10 or 15 feet away in the rainforest, his perspective was thrown off when he could suddenly see a half mile or more in the distance. And that's what he saw. And he thought it was a rabbit. He'd never seen anything from that far away, so had no idea how big it was. It looks like this giraffe is eating that airplane, or at least he's got a hold of its wing, and the reality is, of course, and this has to do with perspective. She does have a head. She's just holding it. It's just perspective also refers to the fact that the closer an object is, the more distinct its details. The farther away, the fuzzier the details. So this wall is probably very similar to this wall, but because this one's farther away, we have fewer details. We can see the actual bricks in this one. We can barely see the bricks in this one. Another monocular cue is interposition. It is where when one object is in front of another, it will obscure a part of that object. And this is an example. So you'd have to ask yourself who's the closest, and this guy is. He's not really holding the sign. The sign is way back there. This guy is behind the vehicle. I think he is. I'm not sure where the flag is. But all these flowers are relatively small. They're just really close to the camera. Or maybe he's standing up in the sunroof. Yeah, he's not really standing on the moon. Well, this is kind of interesting because when they were, this is a picture of the Madonna and Christ child. Whenever they draw the Madonna and Christ child, the Christ child is always in the middle of the picture, he's always in the front of the picture. And that has to do with the fact that he's the most important figure in the picture. Everything else is secondary. So they used to hide things in the periphery because everybody's focus was on the Christ child and the Madonna, his Mary. So they used to hide things on the sides. I don't see anything hidden in this. It looks like Mary's writing something. Another monocular cue is shadowing. Shadowing is a situation where a non-transparent object will create shadows opposite the direction of the light. This also gives us cues about the three-dimensional shape. One-dimensional figure. This it looks more three-dimensional. It's a two-dimensional figure. Okay. Cars. The last cue is texture gradient. The closer an object is, the more detailed the texture, and thus the rougher the appearance. He's got rolls of hay. The closer the roll, the more texture you can see. Closer it is, the more distinct you can see the features. Field of sunflowers. Bricks. A motion cue to depth perception is motion parallax, or the phenomenon that objects that are closer to you move by more rapidly than objects that are far away. That castle is known as Neuschwanstein. It's in Germany. And this is actually the castle where they lived. He built this castle and then he only lived on the first floor, and not for very long. This is his ancestral castle. It was Prince Ludwig of Bavaria. That's where Neuschwanstein is. I've actually been there. And you can go in Neuschwanstein, which means New Swan Castle. There's a lake right down here. But, yeah, this is the castle where the family actually lived. And it's right behind Neuschwanstein. The first floor is the only the upper floors don't have anything in them. He didn't have enough money. Motion parallax. Binocular cues aid depth perception through two mechanisms: retinal disparity and convergence. Retinal disparity refers to the fact that as objects come closer to the face, each eye gets a different view of the same thing. These slightly different views tell the brain just how far away the object is. And you can play that game with your left eye and right eye, and that's known as retinal disparity. This is what it looks like if you look at it through your left eye. This is what it looks like if you look at it from your right eye. And that is the Parthenon in Athens, Greece. Wow, you can see a lot of famous pictures. You get to see Neuschwanstein. And of course, Walt Disney, when he built Snow White's castle, he modeled it after Neuschwanstein. Another binocular cue is convergence. As the object gets closer to the face, the two eyes try to stay on it. At some point, the eyes must start looking cross-eyed. This is accomplished through a great deal of muscular activity and thus tension in your muscles of your eye. This information tells the brain that the object is close to the face, and it gets a little bit painful. You don't leave your eyes cross-eyed for very long. One's ability to perceive that the same objects far away are smaller than they are when close is known as size constancy. And this is an aspect of perspective. And of course, these two figures are exactly the same size, even though this one looks larger than this one. And the same way with these two individuals. This individual is just closer and he is farther away. Size constancy. Oh no. Actually, my feet are that big. But not this big. I don't crush people with my feet. I'm only 5'6" and I have size 12 feet. So yeah, this is the way I feel sometimes. I tend to trip on things. There you go. Oh no, you better. She looks kind of big and mean. People retain the ability to perceive known colors despite the changing light. This is known as color constancy. In the same vein, people perceive brightness as the same, though light intensity may change it. This is known as brightness constancy. And of course, You can see this. It's wintertime. It's January. It's February. It's February. Sorry. If you look at the light during the day, it's yellow. If you look at the light in the summertime, it's white. And that has to do with brightness constancy. Objects seen from odd angles are still perceived as the proper shape because of shape constancy. We know that cat's got legs. it just has them behind her. The stimulus to initiate the auditory system is a vibration that changes the airwaves by accelerating and changing molecules in the air, producing sound. Sound is produced as low as 20 cycles up to 20,000 cycles per second. We determine pitch by the number of cycles per second. These are measured in hertz. We determine loudness by the difference in the minimum and maximum air pressure created by the airwave. A large difference or amplitude, and the louder the sound. The closer the minimum and maximum air pressure, and the softer the noise. Loudness is measured in decibels. In music, the mixing of frequencies that sound good or harmonious together are called consonant. If they do not sound good together, they are called dissonant. Timbre is the mixture of frequencies coming from a musical instrument. If the instrument produces sound from more than one sounding area, it is said to have overtones. And that's the reason why if you play this guitar, it always sounds rich. And if you play this guitar and it's not plugged into an amplifier, it sounds kind of tinny because it doesn't it doesn't have the same amplitude. In this one, you've got you're making the sound is going into the guitar and then coming out of this hole, and that's why it sounds so rich. This one, it doesn't go anywhere, especially if you don't have an amplifier. It is just the plucking of the strings. And the same way with the piano. A piano isn't just the fact that you're hitting that chord. It is also sounding off of a sounding board, and the sounding board is a huge metal thing that weighs a ton. I swear, pianos are so heavy. My wife has this thing for old pianos, or she just wants a piano. So she keeps buying pianos, and then they dry out, and you have to get rid of them and whatever. Anyway, I've destroyed probably 3 pianos in my time, and usually I burn them. And what you're left with, you can take all the strings off of the piano. It's just like a harp. And then there's this thing that weighs about 100 pounds. It's a sounding board, and it's metal. And that's the sound of the plucking the strings will sound off of that metal thing. And that actually creates the sound that you hear when you play the piano. Now you can dampen that sound by hitting the pedals. And if you hit the pedals, what it does, it pushes something up against that sounding board, so it'll stop the sound. It'll stop the vibration. And that's known as timbre. This guitar has no timbre. This one does, because it goes into that hole. When it comes back out, it has a different sound. And this one has timbre because it is not only the plucking of the strings, but also the sound bouncing off of that metal mass. It gives you the sound of a piano. The instrument for hearing is the ear. It consists of 3 parts: the inner, the middle, and the outer ear. The observable portion of the skin and cartilage arranged in dips and folds is called the pinna. And this is the pinna, the part that you see. The pinna catches sound waves and directs them into the external auditory canal, which leads to the middle ear. There you go. There's the pinna. That's one of the reasons rabbits can hear so well, is because they have such large ears. The beginning of the middle ear is a small taut membrane or eardrum. This catches the sound wave and amplifies it. So wait a second. So this is the outer ear here. And the middle ear starts at the eardrum. So the ear canal and the outer portion that you can see, that is the outer ear. The middle ear consists of this structure right here. It catches the sound, so the eardrum actually catches the sound and it amplifies it. This amplification induces the three ossicles. Ossicles means small bones to vibrate. And here are the three bones right here. Oh, here are the three bones right here. The malleus, the incus, and the stapes. Stapes means hammer, anvil, and stirrup. So this is the hammer, the malleus. This is the anvil, that's the incus, and then the stirrup actually looks like a stirrup. The stirrup in turn vibrates against the beginning of the inner ear, another membrane, the oval window. So you have the hammer, malleus, the anvil, the incus, and the stirrup, the stapes. The oval window is a membranous covering into a fluid-filled structure known as the cochlea, or which actually means snail shell. It actually looks like a snail shell. That's it right there. The cochlea contains three fluid-filled chambers, the vestibular, the tympanic, and the cochlear canals. They run like a three-chamber conduit through the cochlea, vestibular, tympanic, and basilar. When the outer canal is stimulated by the vibration against the oval window, it forces the fluid into the other two canals. This movement of fluid stimulates the receptor cells, hair-like neurons that lay between the tectoral and basilar membranes. This area is known as the organ of Corti. That's the organ of Corti right there. The hair receptors tie directly into the auditory nerve, which relays the stimulus to the brain. The brain uses a very simple means to locate sound. The side that the sound is louder on is the side where the sound is coming from. This works unless the sound is straight ahead, behind, below, or above. In this case, individuals usually cock their head to one side to detect location, or they'll just move their head, trying to figure out where the sound is coming from. There are two theories as to how pitch is detected. The place theory alleges that pitch is determined by the place along the basilar membrane which vibrates the sound. The higher the pitch, the closer the response to the oval window. Low-pitched tones are responsive along the whole basilar window. This is why low-pitched tones are easier to hear than high-pitched tones. Frequency theory states that pitch depends on the stimulation of neural impulses that match the frequency of the sound waves. In other words, the hair cells in the organ of Corti vibrate at the same frequency as the sound waves, but only up to 1,000 hertz. There are three types of deafness. Conduction deafness occurs when there is damage to a portion of the middle ear. This malady short-circuits the conduction of sound waves through the middle ear. This type of problem can usually be helped by the use of a hearing aid. Sensory neural deafness comes from structural damage to some part of the inner ear, usually the receptor cells or the auditory nerve. Hearing aids for this type of deafness detect sounds at the problem pitch area and amplify them. Damage to the auditory nerve, however, is not treatable. And this is a cochlear implant. this structure right here. It attaches to the side of your head. Then it gets noise. It gets the stimulation from the same area, and it vibrates. This portion is damaged, so it will get the stimulation here, and it will amplify it into the skull on the side of the head, and that's how they hear. Stimulation deafness is caused by the prolonged exposure to loud noise or loud noises. Often these losses are just at the frequency of a loud noise, such as gunfire, but it is untreatable. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. A lot of men have have hearing losses because of because of loud noises that they've experienced over and over and over again. Soldiers, for example, have hearing losses if they fired weapons, whatever that weapon happened to be, whatever frequency it made noise at. It would destroy the hair cells that pick up that frequency. I do have a hearing loss. I was a lab tech, and lab techs spin down blood in centrifuges. And centrifuges, of course, whine. They do. They whine, and I have a hearing loss at that level. So it's kind of a high pitched sound. Unfortunately, some people talk at that frequency, and it's usually women have talk at that frequency. Now, it's not a very wide range of hearing loss, but there are some individuals I just can't hear them talking, and they're always young females. I had I was in a class in where was I? Mississippi. I was teaching on the Air Force base in Columbus, Mississippi, and there was a young female airman, and she would sit in the back of the room and say things to me, and if I couldn't see her moving her lips, I didn't know that she was actually talking because she talked at the frequency that I have a hearing loss, and it was kind of interesting because you know it was I couldn't hear her. I couldn't hear what she was saying. So sometimes she'd ask me questions and I wouldn't hear her, and she thought I was ignoring her. But the reality was I couldn't hear her. It was fairly high pitched, so most females don't have lower voices than that. Her voice is pretty high, and I couldn't hear her at all. It was kind of funny because her friend was sitting right beside her, and if she said something, then her friend would say, "Tell me what she said." It's really weird, but it made this chapter easier to deal with. The area of the brain that detects smells is most primitive area of the brain. Research done with newborns shows that the baby can identify their mothers by her smell, and that human detection of pheromones is quite acute, though rarely conscious. Odors that we detect are actually gaseous chemicals in molecular form. Smell takes place high in each nostril in the olfactory membrane. When the receptor neurons are triggered, the information is transferred immediately to the olfactory nerve, which transports it to the brain. The sense of smell follows the shortest route of all the senses. Some researchers have speculated that smell is accomplished much as neurotransmitters, each has a specific receptor site on given neurons, but no one has proven this yet. Some people are unable to detect certain smells. This is known as anosmia or smell blindness. My sister-in-law had anosmia. Smell is one of the strongest memory recallers. Some biological psychologists feel that this is because it is tied to the limbic system, which is the seat of long-term memory. Most humans can detect over 10,000 different odors. The sense of taste is, and we talked about pheromones. Pheromones are sexual odors. And this has happened to some people. It hasn't happened to everybody. It's happened to me. Sometimes you will detect an odor and and you become sexually aware. At that point, you become sexually aware of that individual, and usually it has to do with pheromones or putting off odors that you can detect. Some people don't believe in pheromones. We can talk about it if you want, or we don't have to. And it may be that certain groups of individuals, certain people from different parts of the world don't use pheromones to find a mate, and other people do. Um, there are individuals that don't put off pheromones. The Japanese, for example, don't put off pheromones, and they can't detect pheromones. But other individuals can. Europeans can. People from Africa seem to be able to. It's really kind of interesting. And you can believe it or not believe it. You can look them up if you want. We know that animals have pheromones, and so do humans have it. Some humans can detect it, and some humans can't. It's usually subconscious, um, the attraction to different odors of select individuals. Are these sexual odors? No, they are used to attract the opposite sex, but it doesn't have. They're not sexual odors per se. It gets kind of interesting. You can look it up if you like. I don't think we're going to talk about this again, but we talk about this in psychology, and like I said, some people don't believe it, but I do because I've experienced it a couple times. Let me tell you. Do I have time? I don't really have time. Let me tell you a quick story. I hadn't seen my wife in about 6 months. She was stationed in Korea, and I was in Oklahoma. And so I was going to visit. Finally, I was going to get to go visit her. So I was pretty hepped up, and ready to go. Hadn't seen her in a while. So I got on a plane to go to Korea, and you don't fly directly to Korea. We stopped in Japan, and we stopped in Tokyo. Uh, it's a two-day flight. You fly to Tokyo, and then you fly to Seoul. So since I was flying on to Seoul, I was able to not go through customs. When I got to Japan, they just took me to the hotel, and then the next day I got on a flight and went to Seoul. So I got on the the train first, and the people that came next to me. And I don't know if you've ever been in, well, never been. If you've ever been to Japan, you know how crowded it is. So the next group that came in were all the stewardesses, all these little doll, cute as, I mean, they're very attractive women, of course, and young, relatively young. And so here I am, I'm pushed up against the wall, and I've got all these stewardesses around me. And we take off, and it's a monorail, so it's shaking kind of from side to side, and it was, I got people bouncing up against me. It was really kind of interesting, but I didn't detect anything, and I'm going, I wonder if I'm dead. If I've got all these very attractive young ladies bouncing up against me, rubbing up against me, and I'm not feeling anything. This is really kind of strange. So the next day, of course, I got on the plane, and I'm worried. Oh my goodness, I haven't seen my wife in 6 months. I wonder if I'm dead. If that part of our life is no longer something that we're going to be doing. And as soon as I saw her and gave her a big kiss, everything was fine. The difference was, of course, Japanese people don't have pheromones. So I didn't detect any pheromones coming out. And I'm not really used to that because living in the United States, you're around people all the time, and all these people are putting off pheromones. So you're used to detecting them or subconsciously detecting them. But the Japanese weren't putting off any pheromones because they don't have them. But my wife does, of course, because she's a European, and everything was fine. Don't worry, everything was fine. And it took me a while to figure out what was going on the day before. I got all these. I mean, it was almost a lap dance. It was that intense, and I was surrounded by all these stewardesses. What was going on? And the answer was pheromones. They weren't putting off any pheromones, and that I was used to. Put my glasses back on. Okay, sense of taste. The sense of taste is chemical in nature. Our taste receptors identify four basic taste qualities: sweet, sour, bitter, and salty. There is a fifth taste, umami. It has a nutty flavor. It tastes like meat, umami. That's a Japanese word. We find it in fermented fish sauce. Back in the old days, they used to, if you went to a Chinese restaurant, they put MSG in their food so it would have a stronger flavor. And the MSG tastes like umami. And, oh, there we go. Miley Cyrus sticking her tongue out. Ugh, her tongue looks nasty. Most flavors we detect are mixtures. The taste bud is the sensory receptor of the gustatory system, gustatory sense. Taste buds are stimulated by different chemicals. In order for something to be tasted, it must have the ability to break down in water and thus release chemicals to be detected. And if it doesn't break down in water, then you don't taste anything. The taste buds in the mouth are known as chemoreceptors. The tongue is mapped as to the taste that it can detect. The tip is the most sensitive to sweet and salty substances. The sides have mostly sour taste buds. The back and the soft palate and throat are mostly sensitive to bitter taste. Taste bud receptors cells are located around the raised portion of the papillae and the indentations around the bumps. Each nerve has hair-like structures that lace the indentations. The hair-like projections on the taste bud serves as chemoreceptors. Each taste is processed in a different area of the brain. That is what makes taste the slowest of all the senses. Our skin holds neurons that detect touch, pressure, warmth, cold, and pain. Touch and pressure receptors are located around the roots of hair cells. Often, to get a feel for something, one must experience its texture by creating friction or rubbing your skin on the surface. If you just touch something, a lot of times you can't tell what it feels like. You have to rub it in order to feel the texture. And this is known as active touching, when you move your fingers around so you can figure out what something feels like. Our faces and fingers have the most numerous touch and pressure receptors and are therefore the most sensitive. Our temperature detection neurons are located right under the surface of the skin. There are two types, one's for warmth and one's for cold. Warm receptors will initiate the cooling mechanisms of the body, specifically sweating from eccrine sweat glands. Cold receptors will initiate the warming mechanisms. That's goosebumps. Goosebumps are caused when the hair follicles stand up. The reason they stand up is because they need to trap air against your skin, and shivering, of course, which increases the muscle activity and produces heat. Hot is detected with both warm and cold fire at the same time. Pain receptors will fire as well if there is any damage. Pain is a message to the brain that damage has been done to a certain part of the body. There are pain sensors in many parts of our body, but not all. Pain is initiated at the point of contact. For example, you don't have any pain receptors in your brain. Strangely enough, you don't have any in your brain. So if they do brain surgery, potentially what happens is they can anesthetize the skull and the skin, cut into your cut that portion away, and then they could do brain surgery without any anesthesia in that portion of your brain. The pain sensors release chemicals into the blood which inform the brain of injury. 3 of these chemicals are prostaglandin, bradykinin, and chemical P. These chemicals induce the brain to increase circulation to the area to combat infection. This will, of course, cause swelling and redness in the area, especially if blood vessels are traumatized. It will also feel warm to the touch. The warmth will help keep bacteria from growing because it cooks them. Bacteria are very fastidious, tend to be relatively fastidious, and if it gets too warm, that's what a fever is for. If it gets too warm, it kills them. The swelling will also serve to immobilize the area, which helps to protect the area. Analgesic drugs such as aspirin and ibuprofen work because they block prostaglandin production. They are also called anti-inflammatories for this reason. Localized pain, Tylenol works the same way, acetaminophen. Localized pain can often be relieved for the short term by rubbing or scratching the area. This accomplishes what is called the gate theory. Only a limited amount of stimulation can be processed by the nervous system at a time. By flooding the brain with conflicting messages, you're blocking the pain messages from being received. This technique should not be used on broken bones, severe tissue damage, or where any bleeding or extensive swelling is present, but you can rub an area and it will stop the pain. When the brain detects pain, it pumps out its own painkiller, and this is known as endorphin. Actually, there's 3 of them. Endorphin, dynorphin, endorphin, dynorphin, and enkephalin are the 3 pain killers in the endogenous painkillers. Kinesthesis is the sense that informs us about the positions and motions of our various body parts. Our vestibular sense informs us of our body's position relative to gravity. This is accomplished through the detection of semicircular canals and the eustachian tubes in the semicircular canal. People suffering from inner ear infection have a hard time standing up because they don't know where their bodies are. Because usually an ear infection is on one side of your body, not in both sides. And because one is hotter than the other, it's telling you, you're getting different messages from one side of your head than from the other side of your head. And I've had inner ear infections. They're not a lot of fun. You can't stand up, and it makes you nauseous. And that is the end of the chapter. So there you go. Let's see if I still have a face. Yes, there I am. Okay. Well, I'll see you next week. I didn't look up to see what Chapter 6 is all about. But there you go, Chapter 5. You got to see a picture of a woman that looked like my first wife. So I have a picture of my second wife, somebody that looks like my second wife. But I can't remember if it's in this series of lectures or not. So that may be it. You may get to see what my first wife was.